Now that I knew that it was clinical depression, there was a lot of things I could do. I could get better sleeping patterns. I could exercise regularly again. There were a lot of different things that I could put into play. And one of the things was the photography that I remembered back when I very first got the camera and then in South Africa. And that's a part of me now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Photographic Connections podcast. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections, and it brings me great pleasure to welcome Canadian photographer Randy Bullerwell onto the podcast this week. Now, Randy has had his fair share of mental health battles in his life, and through connections with various friends and mentors, he was able to be introduced to the world of photography, and later in life, the world of mindful photography. He gained so much from this that he's gone on to produce his own exhibitions, showing his struggles through some of his deepest depressions, as well as now introducing mindful photography to other people so that they too can feel the benefits that it can bring. Randy also shares how he's worked with children in various roles throughout his life, and through doing this, it's really helped him to stay connected with his inner child and keep this curiosity for life, which he's found great benefit in. I found it a great honour to sit down with Randy and listen to him share so honestly about his mental health battles. If I remember correctly, he said this is one of the first times I think that he's spoken quite publicly on something like a podcast about them. So it really was such a privilege to be able to speak with him. And it now gives me great pleasure to be able to share this with you. Maybe if you're struggling a little bit at the moment, it might just give you some suggestions of things that you may wish to try. Now, of course, photography is not a substitute for working with a trained mental health professional if you are really struggling, but it can be used in combination with traditional therapy means in order to give you some additional release and way of channeling your emotions. And I'm sure no matter who you are, there will be some nuggets of wisdom and ideas that you can take from Randy's sharing. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you all to Randy Bullerwell. Hi Randy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week.
My pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity.
It's really nice to connect with you, and just to give the listeners a little bit of background, you kind of came across my work and then you reached out to me to ask about the mindful photography training program I've completed recently with Ruth, who would have been on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And just when I received your email, I felt very called to have a look at your website. And upon doing so and reading your about section, I just felt like there was something about what you'd written that really called me to ask if you'd like to come on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you today, Randy, because I don't really know much about you at all apart from what I've read. So firstly, thank you for being here. And I guess I'd like to begin is if you're able to go back and share the story of what got you into photography in the first place.
Yeah, that's a bit of a meandering story. So I'll try and keep it brief, but to the point. Back in early 1980s, my roommates and we were all competitive runners in Canada. And we were out in British Columbia and we were looking for a house to rent. And one of my buddies didn't have the security deposit, but he had just started a beautiful job in nursing and he was all excited. So I knew he was good for it. And I said, no problem, but he gave me his Ricoh camera. And that was when I first decided I had known nothing about photography at all. It was film. He showed me how to load it. And besides that, I had a little notebook and I would experiment with the settings. I would just play like I was a little kid. And at the time, I couldn't understand what it was, but I was in my own world and I was able to all the noise, and I worked with abused children. So it was a great opportunity for me to escape for a while and get rid of a lot of the noise, the worries and all that. But at the time, I just knew it was something. I look back now and I can see that it was more of that. So that was back in the early 80s. I didn't pick up my camera again until, well, a little bit. I had a major depression episode prior to the Olympic trials. I wanted to make the Olympic trials. I wasn't top caliber to actually make the team, but my goal was to make the Olympic trials. And I had a really bad knee injury. So I couldn't do that. So I ended up going through major depression, um, drank a lot, had a big problem with drinking and my depression. And that went through probably until 89 when I moved back to Nova Scotia. And it came to a head when I lost my house in a fire due to drinking and a serious depressive episode. Now, at the time, up to that point, I did not know I had depression. I thought I was going crazy. I didn't know what it was, and no one had really. I went to the doctor, and I was never diagnosed until I ended up going into detox and into the mental health facility in my hometown, and they diagnosed clinical depression and anxiety. It felt so good to have answers. Was it scary? Yeah, it still is scary, but at least I had some answers and I had a place to begin. And I started running again after those years off. I ran faster than I had ever run. I hadn't picked up the camera yet though, but I made it to made the Canadian team to the World Masters Track and Field Championships in South Africa. And when I was in South Africa, or when I was going, I said, I'm bringing my camera with me. And I took it and I photographed anything and everything while I was there. And that was an amazing moment for me to, number one, document the whole experience, but number two, to be able to help cope, but because of the stresses of competition, but also to help me play, explore, discover, and just be a kid again. And so once that happened, I came home. I went along the South Shore of Nova Scotia for about 3 weeks and I photographed the autumn colors and I sent all those 100 pictures to each of the families that billeted me. And I figured I was onto something. It wasn't until 2003 that Santa Claus brought me a digital camera. And the digital camera was, I'm also, and Santa also put in my stocking a certificate to take a 10-week course on photography. And that's when I got hooked. Yeah. And it was more contemplative photography, but that's when I really started and I got hooked. And then I decided to go to university they take their what do you call it? Adult education program on photography. So I got into the dark room, but I also had my digital. It was a bit confusing. It was quite a learning curve with the digital, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow. That's phenomenal, Randy. You can really see how photography's played such a pivotal part in your journey. But what I love about your story there is how other people have played such a big role. You know, your friend when you were younger, giving you that camera when you were about to rent that property. And then later on, you getting gifted the camera and the course for Christmas. And it's just like, wow, you know, it's like other people and other, you know, have really played a role in helping you, or like, I guess, guiding you almost, you know,
Yeah.
to almost pursue photography.
Well, you're right. For me, it was a lot about just taking on the active role of networking. Now that I knew that it was clinical depression, there was a lot of things I could do. I could get better sleeping patterns. I could exercise regularly again. There were a lot of different things that I could put into play. And one of the things was the photography that I remembered back when I very first got the camera and then in South Africa. And that's a part of me now.
Yes, that's the thing, isn't it? Everything we go through in life becomes a part of us, and it's almost like this imprint within us. And when we can have a way of coping with those things in life, it's, Yeah, it's just just amazing to hear how all that's pieced together. And I know that just from reading in your website, as well as having this connection to other people that spurred you forward on your journey, you also gain a lot of inspiration from other people, be it other photographers or
Yes.
through literature. So I wondered if you could delve into that a little bit more. You know, how do you gain? Where does this inspiration from other people's work come from?
That's a great question. For me, first of all, I want to go back a little bit. I've always worked with children. I took an active role in university of becoming a playground supervisor. And at that time, I saw this was back in the early to mid 70s. So that was a time when when I saw a child every morning show up before I was. And then I got up a little earlier because I was feeling a little suspicious, and he was sleeping under the apparatus, the playground. And I asked him what was going on. He said his mom and her boyfriend were fighting again, and they kicked me out for now. And I I had to report that. It felt tough, but it was a part of me that I said I want to do what I can to help make a difference in children's lives. My childhood was amazing. I love my childhood. I love the freedom to go out into the woods, to go to the ocean and do all that. And that's a lot of what attracted me to the topic or the subject matter that I photograph today. Back to the question as to the inspiration with little kids and a child. I'm a child at heart anyway. I hope. I love The Little Prince, the story of the Little Prince. And every time I read it to my class when I became a teacher for a while, I was picking up something new. They were teaching me about certain little childhood wisdoms that, yes, us adults don't always listen or take things seriously like we should. All those little things put together gave me the inspiration to remember to play, to explore, to discover. And I always kept that sort of like a motto with me. And thanks to the children teaching me that. Then I went to a photography, but it was word on the street. So it was all about writing, but they had an arts tent. And there was Margot Metcalf, who was a photographer, the one I took the course with, actually. She had her work out, and a lot of them were on seascapes and landscapes. But they were images that I felt I could walk right into the scene, and it brought me back. I knew then that I wanted to be able to affect people in that same way. And whether I'm doing it or not, I don't know, but I'm enjoying the process, the journey of trying. And so that was Margot Metcalf. The other one is really and dear to my heart is the late Kathy Mooney. She died in 2017. She and I would go on our own retreats for a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, and just do photography and talk about anything and write anything and just go for walks. And it was a wonderful time. When we went to Sable Island, I'm not sure if you know anything about Sable Island off the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada. It's about 200 kilometers off the coast of Nova Scotia, and it has wild horses there. Well, we managed to get onto that island, and we were all five of us were so excited to get out and photograph the horses and the seals and just get going. She stopped, she sat down right in a beautiful little location. And I said, "What are you doing, Kathy?" She said, "I want to be mindful of this. I want to take this all in." And so she didn't start photographing till the next day. And so we talked that night more about that whole process. And she said, "I like it to go slow. I like to appreciate where I'm at. And I like to be able to kind of look at habits, routines of the animals or the ocean and the waves and just be a part of that first." That is another part of mindfulness that sticks to me today. So those are some of the inspirations in my life that really are solid for me.
Mm. I think it really shows the importance of connecting with other people and surrounding ourselves with other people because, we gain a lot of inspiration from others and from community and friendships and courses and whatever else we may do. And I think it's a great way of us exploring ourselves as well. We I think gravitate towards people that we naturally feel some sort of resonance with. And I love the almost like the tale of all these people in your life that have come, along your path to share these things with you. And I also love that you spoke there about what the working with children taught you, that having that fun, that sense of play, because I think as adults, quite often we lose that. It's something that I've always had this curiosity and this excitement for nature and exploring it with my camera. But I notice even in my life, I can be a bit too serious sometimes. And it's like, I think it's important as adults that we reconnect with that inner child, and especially when it comes to things like creativity.
Definitely. And Kim, I was not only a counselor with abused children, but after about 9 years, it became a toll on me. And I thought I still want to work with children, but I want to work in a different capacity. So I became a teacher. And I worked with elementary school age children, so children between 6 and 11 years of age. And again, even in the classroom, they're teaching you every day about risk taking, about just giving things a good, honest go. And those are the kind of things that I really am trying to mirror now when I give back my photography. I also now volunteer because when I was in doing all my running and went to the world championships, the running community was so supportive of me. Um, they raised money for me to for the flight to South Africa. They found me billeters, their relatives in South Africa. So in order to repay, I don't like to coach running, but I have done that. I wanted to give back a certain way. So I went to London, England, and I took the photo voice training in London, England. And when I took that course, I knew I wanted to teach youth photography, children and youth photography. And so I do that once a year, every year since 2015 down here in Aruba. And next year, 2024, this has come to an end now. So in 2024, I'm going to be teaching seniors, a whole new experience for me. But I always wanted to work with senior citizens, or as we call them, elders here.
It's so lovely. It's so lovely to see almost you branching out, and you're going to be, this is, although it's doing your teaching still and similar things, just working with different age groups. I know it could have a big impact on, you learn as much from them as they do for you. So that's exciting. And I love that you're really giving back, that what photography's given you throughout your journey, you're now flipping that and then helping to introduce other people to it and what it can do for them. And I know something that's really important to you is when you're out and about is photographing things that most people take for granted. You walk around and you photograph, I guess, maybe just the smaller things that most people may not see. And I think that goes back to children as well. Children see the world with curiosity, and they can just go out the door and they find something beautiful. And again, we kind of lose that as adults. We want these epic scenes and these epic places. And again, it's about going back to just being like, you can just walk out your door and there's something beautiful there. Is that kind of something that you found when you discovered photography, was just starting to really connect with these things again?
Yes, and I love the word connect, and you use that that often. I just love to connect and self-discover a lot, like self-discover the internal me, but I also like to discover the world around me and appreciate the smaller things. Being sober now, for sobriety is a 34-year journey. In January 11th will be 35 years. I still live one day at a time. I appreciate the small things and enjoy life today. Um, I don't worry too much about the future, although my anxiety does kick in once in a while. But that's been doing really well lately. My depression has been doing really well lately. A lot of it has to do with me getting out with my camera, exercising, getting fresh air, the salty breeze, but also being able to, Kim, photograph and capture some of the elegance that's right in front of my eyes, and being able to, when I get back home, I don't touch, it's like film. I don't touch my photos for a couple days. I wait until they're delivered from the drugstore, pretend, and I look at them and I process them. When I process them, I'm reliving. Now, when I see images, I'm going, what was I thinking? Automatically, the kids come to my mind. Well, you don't get to where you are without testing, without trial and error, without experimenting, without being curious about things. And so I take the good with the bad. I learn from them. But bottom line, it isn't what I produce, it's being out in nature.
Yes. And that experience is so important, isn't it? It's, it's not the end result. The photographs are a bonus, aren't they? But it's like, it's actually, I think I find photography is an incentive to go outside. It's like I can go for walks quite easily without my camera, but sometimes it's like having my camera with me, it just gives you more of an incentive to go outside, more of an incentive to connect with the world. And it gives you a way, a media to do that as well. But yeah, it's definitely the experience. It's because that's where the memories come from, isn't it? And of course, we can relive the memories through the images, but we actually have to have created those experiences to have the memories in the first place.
That's right. And there are sometimes, like Kathy Mooney did in Sable Island on the beach, she wasn't taking any pictures, but she could recall that first day and everything she saw just by her mental imagery, what she saw, how she experienced it, the salty air on her face, the noise of the seals, she could give you every minute detail. And then she went out the next day and started doing photography. Did she stop? Yeah. Every day she took some time to just be there and be quiet, be at peace with nature.
I think it really brings in that mindfulness approach, doesn't it? But also, I think the well-being benefits. I know in my past I used to run around a lot and be chasing the light and this frantic energy. And yeah, you might come away with photographs you were happy with, but actually now, for me, it's as much about sitting and observing or walking around and observing as it is the photography. And I enjoy my photography so much more now, and I feel so much better for it as well, because when I'm out there, I'm calm and I'm relaxed. I'm not stressed and chasing things. And just that shift of perspective has been huge for me in my own photographic development. But it seems like for you, that was something that was there almost from the beginning.
No, I went through the frantic approach. I wanted to capture anything and everything that attracted my eye. The only thing that slowed me down when I first got the camera was my little notebook to write down the settings, the aperture, the shutter speed. That slowed me down before I went to the next one. So, did I know what I was doing? No. It wasn't until years later when I went to university. I didn't go on to Google and Google what it meant to aperture back then in the early 80s. So for me, it was just testing. I'll figure it out somehow. That's all I wanted to do, is to just figure it out. Now I'm looking forward to having my participants of my workshops figure it out and watch them play, watch them discover, and watch them connect with their communities. That's a big part of it down here, especially in Aruba.
It's interesting hearing that. I just was thinking back there to when I began photography. I didn't have any books at the time. I think YouTube was quite new, so there wasn't much tutorials out there. And I did buy a few magazines, but, I learned most of my settings from trial and error. And I just thought there, I wonder, because there's so much content out there now, books, magazines, YouTube videos, all the rest of it, training courses, I almost wonder whether some people that are getting into photography now are maybe losing that experience of simply going out there and testing things out and that trial and error and making these I don't want to say mistakes, because to me there's no such thing as a mistake. They're all learning opportunities. But I think now I find many people just want instant results and they don't go through that process, and then they fall out of love with it. But I think when you've come into something and you have that experimentation stage and somebody's not just telling you this is what you do, because you really begin to find yourself and your own creative and artistic output, rather than just, this is the settings I need to use, this is what I need to photograph, because then there's just no soul in the images. But yeah, I've never thought about things that way before. So I think you've just made me think a little bit differently about, maybe how different people get into photography and some of the things they may miss if they're simply being told what to do rather than trying to find their own way.
Yeah, I think so. And for me to be able to give that opportunity, especially to children, and I can't wait to see what the elders think about this. But I will be introducing a lot of mindfulness, a lot of connecting and self-discovery. But we do have to learn a little bit of the how the camera works in order to get that out of the way. So we'll be doing, small principles of things, but then we get out and play and we use those. And I always say to everyone, please don't delete anything. They're all learning opportunities for us, as you say. And so I save every image that I make. I save them on you should see my external hard drives. I save everything, Kim. And I think it's important to be able to, what do you call it, to show that, be an example and show that for other people. I think that's important as well. But I cannot wait to take the course with Ruth Davey as well on mindful photography, to be able to have a better understanding of the principles of this, and how not only to facilitate, but what does it mean to be a mindful photographer. So that will be a big component in the future for me.
Yes. And it all goes back to that learning and getting inspiration from other people as well, doesn't it? And just developing these skills, which is beautiful. And I love your vision for the future, and what you'd like to do. I think it's great when people have these ideas and these things they're doing. And, it's happening all around the world, which I think is the beauty of things like the internet, that we can now do training courses with people from all around the world so that we can bring these principles and these ideas into our local communities. And I was thinking, just going back to kind of your story and what mindful photography does for you. How do you feel when you're out there in nature with your camera? It's obviously a very contemplative thing and there's much peace involved, but I just wondered if you were able to articulate, when you're out there in nature, just you and your camera, how does that make you feel?
That's a great question. And I think I can answer that, but it might be a roundabout way. First of all, I lose track of time when I'm out there. Time doesn't mean anything to me except when I want to get there before the sun rises, because I love doing photography with the dawn light and the beautiful dawn light before the sun even comes up. That's the time that I really enjoy being out doing my photography. So I work a lot of long exposures, trial and error with long exposures, with and without a polarizing filter. And again, just by experimenting. But for me, the number one thing is I lose track of time and I don't really care. I don't have any pressing things. I'm retired, so I can go that route. Viscerally, in my stomach, I'm feeling I'm feeling really good in my stomach. I'm feeling settled. Um I'm not sure visually in my body. I'm just feeling like I'm in a great place. It's not like I was transported there, but I feel like I'm in a new place. In a place of discovery. I'm in a place where life is really good. And then there's my breathing. My breathing is so settled. My breathing is nice and relaxed, except when I think that I've captured not even a picture, but I visualize when I have my remote shutter remote, and I'm watching the waves, for example, come in. and I'm seeing something unfold and I click that camera. It isn't because I think I got the image. It's because I saw what unfolded in front of me. Now, Kim, I've had been out photographing with people where they've seen me like a little kid giggle, clap my hands because I'm so excited. And they say, you get right into this, don't you? And yeah, I do get right into it because it is a big moment for me, and it's a time to celebrate when I'm out there doing that.
Mm. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful because, again, it goes back to connecting to that inner child, but it's also emotions and feelings that I think we sometimes really struggle to connect with. And it's like just letting go. You know, when you speak about the fact that you lose track of time, it's like you enter that flow state. It's like every minute, every hour just rolls into one, but you're so immersed in it that it's like nothing else matters in that moment. And I guess in connection to, you know, the mental health struggles you've had throughout the years, to actually find a way that you can lose track of time and flow and just be free. You know, and so immersed in something you're doing, that must do wonders for how you feel and you know the continuous battle that we have with these things.
You know what? It's energizing. It's a whole new respect for nature. Every day I find something to be thankful and of, and I respect that. But really, for me, it's when I get back home and my husband always asks, how'd it go? Oh, it was amazing. The only word that I ever use to describe it, and he goes, yeah, but what was amazing about it? And I go, nature. And then I get into telling him what I witnessed, what I experienced, and why we're in such a good place, whether it's here in Aruba or back home in Nova Scotia, Canada. We are very fortunate. We're lucky. And that gets celebrated every time I'm out there as well.
How lovely. How lovely. And I know, like, moving forward in your work, or from what I've kind of read on your website, is, you know, you really want to kind of address mental health concerns. So I wondered, you know, in terms of connecting that with your photography, you know, what is your vision, I guess, for the future of what you'd like to offer the world?
Okay, yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to 2016. My husband and I, like in 2016, I was off work because of my depression. And I went through a very chronic 3.5 months of depression. If it were not for my husband telling me to pick up well, suggesting for me to pick up the camera, I really don't know how that would have all unfolded. So when we were out in the three-season room, the snow was still out on all the colorful Adirondack chairs, but the sun was shining in it, Kim, and it was shining through a little glass jar in the room. And he caught me. Like I felt like honestly, I was comatose. I don't know a better word, and I'm sorry, but I just was out of it completely. But something caught my eye, and he brought that to my attention. He's not a man for big words, but when he says, "What are you looking at?" and I say, "I don't know," he says, "Look closer." And then he says, "Why don't you get your camera?" So as a result of that, I now have a traveling exhibition in Nova Scotia. It's going into its third year in 2024 of 16 photographs that I had taken out on the decks with the Adirondack chairs with a plastic container and water in it. And I shot through it. It was abstract, and I shot through it, and I was attracted to the colors, the shapes. I didn't see imagery in it at all. I just saw colors and shapes, and the bubbles in the jar in the plastic container were the textures, I guess. Next thing you know, for 3 months, I'm shooting photographs. I'm out there, and he's like, "Where is he now?" And he could find me on the deck somewhere. 3.5 months, I was not ready to disclose or to talk about my experience or to show my images to anyone, because when I opened them up and I looked at them, Kim, They were I'll go to tears right now. They were very telling. It was the ebb and flow of living with depression. And so some of the images were showing resiliency. Some were showing I'm going down a circular tube. I'm losing it. Some of it was gentle, but I put those together, 16 of them, that really look at the ebb and flow of the 3.5 months that I navigated that depressive episode. And so my first exhibition was a huge success. My second one, another one, huge success. But people starting to think, why don't you change the subject to something more positive? And I can, because for me, it's my story. It's my life experience. It is what it is. And I struggled, but I worked through it. I showed that sense of resiliency and I documented it along the way. And I want people to talk about mental wellness, mental health. And we all know somebody, or we're experiencing it ourselves, that go through this, if even a family member, a friend, we know of somebody. And let's just continue the conversation because there's still some stigma attached. I didn't know how much, even talking to you today, how much I was going to bring this up. And I shouldn't be feeling that way. But I am slowly overcoming this. So I do appreciate the opportunity to have a little forum to give my piece. But that's one thing that I really like to do. So that has started. The other things I'd like to do is do workshops on mindful photography, and get participants involved, like, and experience what I did, to be able to also experience mindfulness, being in the moment, the flow, the the therapeutic value of photography, and understanding that whether it's an iPhone or a digital SLR or a mirrorless, it doesn't matter. It's getting out there and connecting with self and discovering. And so those are what I'm really looking at when I talk about mindfulness.
That's beautiful, Randy. And I just want to say thank you for your honesty and what you've shared as well, because, I think the more open we can be about our own struggles, the more it opens other people up to the conversation. And I think you've really hit home there the beauty of photography. In your darkest moments, it was like you found a release. And sometimes some of our most meaningful work, if we're, when we do creative things, often happens when we're in really difficult situations and difficult places. And if we can find a way of transmuting that emotion into something, a lot of poets and writers do this so well, and musicians, so it's like, why can't photography be the same? And it's interesting you speaking there about some people, maybe suggesting that you try and have a lighter, happier approach to your images. But it's like, as you say, it's your story and you created those images in those dark moments, which means when people look at them, they feel that too. But for some people who've been through that, or who are trying to understand what it may be like for, relatives or friends that they have experiencing it, it can take something like the power of photography to help them understand, or to help them not feel alone if it's them that's experiencing it, and see a part of themselves reflecting back in them. And I think it's beautiful that you've managed to create this exhibition from this place that you were in, because I think that's one of the powers of photography, is sharing what we've created and being true to that, so that we can help and inspire other people. And yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge how beautiful it is that you've had the courage, I guess, to put those images out there and share the story.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. The other thing I'd like to do, you mentioned writing, is I have a book on Blurb, a self-published book, and it's calling Intimate Dawn, A Time of Thoughtful Respite. And for me, it was an opportunity to put my haiku poetry in with images of South Shore, Nova Scotia, 25 images, and the rugged east coast of Aruba, 25 images, and each one of them has a haiku poem with it. And again, it looks at the ebb and flow of living with depression, but this one is more over the years as opposed to being right in the moment of a depressive episode. Um, I would like to do more of that. I would like to, because I have a master's in counseling degree as well. And I would love to be able to put my experiences, my learnings, and the mindfulness approach together and begin writing and sharing my images with some writings. And that's another project I'm thinking about as we go along.
Yeah. I mean, writing's so powerful, isn't it? I think, getting stuff out of our bodies and our heads and onto paper, or, typing them up. And yeah, that's one of my plans in the coming weeks. So before this podcast goes out, but I'm hoping to just spend some time writing, because when you can combine writing with photography, I think it just it gives you that story to share, and it's a beautiful combination that works really well together. So yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, the thing for me is I have dyslexia also. So I have to write and rewrite. So it's just a matter, like my photography, get it down on paper first, and then I'll figure it out after that. But except for photography, I don't just take one image and edit it to make it work. I take 7 or 8 or 10 images of the same thing and really immerse into the subject that's before me.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a really beautiful, very beautiful way to do it, because it allows us to engage all of our senses, doesn't it? And it gives not just the image more meaning, but it gives the experience more meaning. And the more meaning and emotion we have in an experience, the more likely we are to remember it from a psychological perspective. So it just gives you more of those that connection that we spoke about earlier. And yeah, it all just ties in so well with all the things that's interested you throughout your life and what you're going on to do now, which no, I'm really excited for you, Randy. I think it's brilliant that you're taking your experience into your work and going on to help other people.
Thank you very much.
Well, Randy, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Like I said, I didn't know too much about you beforehand, but something just really called me to ask you to come on. And I can totally see now why I felt so called to speak with you, because I think your story's got real deep meaning. And I think it's just amazing what you're going on to do. And, anybody out there that's struggled with depression and anxiety themselves, or alcohol addiction, or who's had an interest in sports in their life and has experienced an injury, because it can be devastating when you've trained so hard for something. I think you will have touched a lot of people's hearts today, and if they're not experiencing these things, then they'll probably know relatives and friends who have. So I just want to thank you again, not just for coming on, but for your honesty and being open to doing this. And it's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Same here, Kim. I really do appreciate the opportunity.
And for anyone that's really resonated and would like to connect with you, where can people go to do so?
I have a website. It's just a new one with Squarespace. So I have a website, and it's www.randybullerwellphotography.com. And it's all one word spelled out. And I'm also on Facebook just under Randy Bullerwell.
Brilliant. Well, thank you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here. Have a good day.
Well, it was such a pleasure to speak with Randy and get to know him and the struggles that he's gone through in life. And I really felt after speaking with him that his story really shows how photography can potentially help us in many ways to get through some of those deeper and darker times, both in finding us this release and this way of getting out there and connecting with the world, but also to be able to put our emotions and feelings into our images. And I think it's so lovely now that Randy is now sharing his work and the things that he's learned throughout life through mindfulness to offer that to other people. So thank you again, Randy, if you're listening, for your time. It was so lovely to speak with you. And I'm sure you gained something from listening to his story as well. I just want to end by saying thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. It really does mean the world to me. And if you'd like to get further involved with Photographic Connections, including coming to Scotland to learn firsthand some mindful photography exercises that you can then take home and implement into your own life, as well as getting hands-on experience with them on the weekend itself, or if you'd like to join our lovely supportive online community and our upcoming course, Learning to See, where I'm going to sit down with you for 5 days in a row in a small group of 10 people, and we're going to learn the art of seeing the world so that we can really tap in to our intuitive sense and that mindfulness process, so that you can then go out there into your own life and create images from the heart that have much deeper meaning. And as you heard in Randy's story, he gained a lot from connecting with other people, including a couple of mentors along the way. And throughout the year, I regularly host 6-week one-to-one online mentorship programs. So if you'd like me to mentor you forwards on your journey, it would be an absolute honour. So for full details on this and everything else that I've just shared, you can find all the details on photographicconnections.com. Thank you so much once again. And now that this podcast has come to an end, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photographic opportunities just waiting for you to discover.